Hello, everyone. No introduction needed. I'm Super, and today, in episode 6 of the Never Ending Siege series, I'm going to discuss the roles on a team and competitive play in Rainbow Six Siege and what you should probably expect from this role, or if you're suited for this role as a player on a team. Now, it is important to note that you are going to see several different roles in this video that, I mean, if we add up all these roles, it wouldn't just fit into 5 players on a team. Some of these roles can be categorized down into one specific player. Some of these roles aren't always needed, but I thought that I would go over what I would say are important aspects of your team to identify and make sure that you have people suited to be able to cover these areas of the team. And so the first role on a team is going to be the endgame leader. Now, this isn't exactly a certain thing they should be doing on the team, but the endgame leader is the person who should be the main voice, and a lot of the times, as you see in the name of the role, the leader of your team. This player can be the IGL from any role. It's usually a comfort option, but I will say typically the IGL is on more of a support-oriented role because they're doing more thinking than they are shooting. They're, in a way, trying to solve the puzzle the other team is showing them. They're trying to look for opportunities for their teammates rather than always focused on what they can do themselves. This is the person who is usually going to be the most vocal. This is the person who, what I like to say, has the final say on calls. You know, on a team, several people could have ideas, several people could feed information, right, on where things are open, where players are, whatever may be going on. The IGL is the person on the team who will say, this is what we're going to do, and that's what the team will do. This is also the person on attack and defense who usually call the strategy that you're going to run for that round. Obviously, every team, in theory, should have defaults, and that is your strategy that you've practiced a million times before you play a match. This is the setups. This is where people maybe have drones set up to cut off the area you're going to clear. This is the person who's going to call those kind of things before the round, and also typically the person who's going to call adjustments, whether it be on your setup pre-round or setup during the round or what you're trying to do. And as I said, this person is usually going to be a support, but that doesn't mean this person will always be a support. This player can do this from any role as long as they're comfortable doing it. Some examples would be myself, Super, and I'm an in-game leader. Canadian on Dark Zero, one of the more storied in-game leaders. He's a flex player. Limbs on BDS, he is an in-game leader. He's a flex player. And Psycho on NIP is an in-game leader, and he's also more of a flex frag player. So very rarely, I think, will you see just an entry player or something on the IGL role. I think recently we actually did see, Merc have success with this on TSM, but usually the IGL to me is going to be support or flex player, just because they're not always kind of in the thick of it. And the first real role on a team is going to be the hard support player. So this is the player who both on attack and defense is playing support. This will usually be the breach on your team, the person who's going to plant the bomb, and for most teams, going to be the smoke player. A lot of teams, obviously, depending on the region, can play smoke more aggressively, but this is the person who is defending site. If you're doing a 4-man roam, this is the one player who is going to be in site. This person is usually the person who's going to call execute because they'll have the bomb. This is the person who typically is going to have the worst stats on the team because they're not necessarily playing for kills. They're playing to open a wall, to plant the bomb, to drone, to play their utility, to delay on defense. This person needs to have extremely good game knowledge in terms of not only setting up site, whether it be with smoke, mute, whatever it may be, knows the holes to make, how to play utility and not use it too early, how to stay alive as long as they can in sight. This is a person who is probably going to be more on the passive side. You don't want a super aggressive hard support player because they could be giving your team untimely deaths. And if you lose if you lose your breach player early, if you lose your smoke player early, that's a big deal in terms of how the rest of the round will play out. And this is also the player on your team who is likely to be last alive a lot because they are playing to stay alive. Going to be a lot of unwinnable situations and some winnable situations, so this player will probably be in among the most clutch situations on the team as well. Some examples of a hard support player would again be myself, SUPR, Shepard on Empire, Brid on BDS. This is the player who's going to have the most bomb plants on the team and usually going to be the site player and the breach player. And the next role we're going to have is the support player. Now, the difference between this player and a hard support is this is the player who is only kind of playing support on one side, whether it be attack or defense. So this player could be the breach, could be the site player, but on attack or on defense, maybe they're playing a different role. As we just said, support player on attack, usually going to be the main droner for the team, the person on breach, the person planning on the bomb. On defense, this is going to be the site player. Obviously, you have an important job to stay alive, keep your utility alive, and this player obviously should have very good communication and is often going to be seen as an enabler, but this player may have a little bit more fragging power, or they're just able to play areas extremely well that are not that advantageous. So if your support player, say, doesn't have the best aim, if they're able to stay alive in areas that traditionally are what we like to call death spots, then this player might be playing that on a certain side on defense. And an example of that would be Geo on TSM. Obviously, on attack, he is their hard breach player, but on defense, Chala plays smoke, and Geo will be on castle. He'll be on Jaeger a lot. And usually he is playing areas that are not that advantageous for him. He is more so playing to delay a lot of time. He's playing to delay a lot of utility. And if he's able to get a kill or two in these areas, that's seen as a bonus. He's just very good at understanding his job is to not necessarily play for the kill. It's to play to burn utility and play to burn as much time as you can. So this is just a one-way support player. And we have the secondary support player. And usually this is going to be the second breach on a map if you need it. Every team has a main breach player. You might need, like, say, on Clubhouse, maybe you want Thermite as your main breach and Habana as the secondary breach. This player is usually not going to be the one planting the bomb. This would also be a player that I classify as a flank watch player. So it could also be, your Nomad, your Zero, whatever you may be running to hold a flank. And this player is essentially a fragger once the utility that they bring is used or they're no longer needed for whatever they may be doing. This is a player who does have fragging power, is a player who is able to make plays if need be, and it's a player who is skilled enough, with maybe something like Mav that they can make good time on clearing that breach part, doing whatever is needed, clearing etc. utility, and then moving on to focus more on getting kills. Good example of this player would be Yaga on OXG, who on some maps would play, an Ace or Thermite for the team, but Fox is usually the primary breacher for this team. And while Yaga on some maps might be playing an entry role, on other maps he might be playing that second breach. And this could also be a good example for on defense, where you have a main site player, the smoke or the mute usually, and then maybe you're going to bring a Cade or a maestro. And this is somebody who is also usually going to be playing around site, but obviously they're not bringing as much utility to stop plant. They're bringing utility for the setup, and then they are kind of helping site, but they're not playing exactly to just stay alive so they can burn at the end of round. And then we have the entry player. The entry player is the space maker. This is the person who's going to be the first person in any room. This is the most aggressive and fearless player on the team. This player should lead your team in entry engagements. And usually this player is probably the most mechanically gifted on your team because they're running in a room, taking fights that aren't necessarily always advantageous to them, and winning a lot of them. This player is very good at following drones. They don't get ahead of the drone. They're able to play off of communication. This player is also good at communicating with the second entry and the rest of his team to play off him when he's, entering an area. This player is fearless. They're not going to sit there, let 3 drones get shot, and then run in the room. They're going to follow the drone. Once they know where the person is, they're going to run in the room. They don't need to waste time to take the fight. They think they'll win every fight, whether that is a fight they should win or not. And this player will die first a lot. They might not even have an overall great kill-death ratio, but they will be the player who opens up areas for your team to trade and then take control. Every team needs an entry player. If you do not have an entry player, your team will be very passive and stall out a lot because you'll be struggling to take control of areas on the map that you're trying to clear. An example of this player is obviously Merc on TSM, Shaiko on BDS, Rexen on Sonics. These players have very good aim, and they're fearless, and they will run into a room and open it up, and they don't care about dying. And then we have the secondary entry player. This is a player with excellent aim, but a more passive player who has high fragging ability. This is the person who's going to follow up that entry player a lot of times. Maybe it's a Finka, maybe it's a Zofia. This player is probably not going to have as much opening engagements as the entry player, but will still have a good amount. And this is somebody who will also still play a fragging operator. Could be Twitch, could be Zofia, could be Yana, could be Finka. There's a lot of operators that you can play as a second frag. And this is a player who has excellent aim, because if you're following up the entry player, you at least better be able to trade that. You can't be missing shots as the secondary entry, and then you go 0 for 2 on that entry. And this is also a player who's more on the patient side, because you don't want 2 maniacs running in and then nobody's getting traded. You want this player to be able to play off of the entry player. And so this is also a player who needs to have pretty good communication, understanding what the entry player is going to do and how you can play off of that. A good example of this player would be Hyper on Dark Zero. Hyper, obviously a long time top frag getter inside of NA, but he's not an entry player. He doesn't usually lead their team in entry engagements, but he will lead their team in kills a lot, because he plays well off of the entry players who kind of get him in areas where he can trade kills. And then once he's set up in an area, he has very good aim, and likely he'll win a lot of those aim duels he takes. And next, we have the Lurker. The Lurker is what I would call the playmaker. This player is going to look for opportunities to open things up, and a lot of the time, this player is going to be by themselves, or maybe just acting off of one drone. This player should have excellent game sense, because like I said, they will be alone a lot on the map. They will not have a lot of information available to them. They'll need to be able to identify areas of the map that are weak based off of communication, maybe based off of 1 or 2 drones. And they'll need to be able to get kills, because if they don't, they're just going 0 for 1 a lot. This player is probably going to be more of a baiter. That means they'll play off of what's going on somewhere else, because they won't expect you to necessarily come from the backside to come into sight. This player is doing unexpected plays, kind of baiting what the rest of the team is doing. As it says, this player could be completely across the map doing something that doesn't really make sense to you, but they're taking map control by themselves and forcing the defense, to to, slowly fall back. This could also be a player on defense. A lurker could be a player on the opposite side of the map from the defensive setup and kind of playing for a flank or a late kill on somebody underneath, whatever it may be. This player is going to be very good at identifying openings and opportunities and not afraid to take them. And a lot of the time, this is the player who is going to lead your team in kills. A lurker has become a very important role within Rainbow Six Siege. A good example of lurkers would be Citizen, Grixer. These are players who they can get kills without, necessarily being escorted around the map by drones, and they're able to play well off of what the rest of the team is doing. However, this is also a role where if the rest of your team is struggling to do things, you will likely struggle to do things as well because they don't have to respect what your team is doing on the opposite side of the map. And, if they know that you are a very predictable lurker, then you will have a hard time making plays because they'll know that you always do this or that. And we have a flex player. This is a player who will pretty much play any number of roles, but does have fragging ability. This is a lot of times going to be the vertical player on your team, so your Buck or Sledge. They have very good knowledge of positioning and how to play different operators and utility. And they're able to stay alive, communicate, and essentially also get frags. A lot of time, this might be your third fragger on your team. Maybe your two entry players, your lurker, are the top two, but this is going to be another player who gets a lot of kills. Maybe this player will not have the most opening kills or entry engagements, but this is somebody who's usually going to be very good with nades, very good with utility, and know how to stay alive, playing vertical holes, playing, maybe a sort of a roamer spot, just playing in areas with different operators every single round. They're a little bit predictable. And a good example of this player might be Hot and Cold on SSG. He can play Sledge, doesn't always play Sledge. He can play Melusi, doesn't always play Melusi. Sometimes he might even be playing Sight. There is a lot of different roles that this player has the ability to play, and they have the ability to be effective on all of these roles rather than what we just would call a one trick, somebody who can only play one thing. And now we have our roamer, and this is going to be a defensive role. This is your playmaker on defense. This is likely to be the most aggressive player for your defense, going to get in a lot of entry engagements. And yes, a lot of times this will also be the same as your entry player. Your roamer might be your entry player because typically if you're aggressive, so you play the roam. They're able to understand how to play for time and kills and usually have a good idea of how to hold, when to hold, and when to give things up for map control. And yes, this player needs very good aim because they'll be taking a lot of one-on-one fights, maybe some one-on-two fights. Maybe they'll be kind of stuck in areas of the map where they can't get help a lot. This is going to be a player who should get a good number of kills. This player is very important for your defense because they allow you to extend your defensive setups and not give up full map control. They should have pretty good communication to coordinate plays with the other roamers on their teams and communicate where the attackers are. And this is a player who is typically going to be aggressive. For this, I would say there are a lot of roamers you can use examples of, but we'll go with Cyber on FaZe. A lot of times he may be by himself. He's going to be completely across the map from the setup, but he's playing within his own setup with maybe a teammate or two, and they're looking to delay time, whether it's with the Mozzie, the Jaeger, whatever it may be, and then fall back to sight slowly, but not do that for free. Maybe he'll get a kill. Maybe he'll shoot a bunch of drones. Maybe he'll waste a bunch of utility. The roamer is important to try to waste time, and if they can, get a kill or go 1-for-1, because if you didn't know, going 1-for-1 on defense, especially if you're an operator on defense where your utility's already placed, does still favor the defense. And we have our secondary roamer. This is somebody who plays well off of the roamer, and they're able to hold down areas of a map very well. They're able to play very, very strong time positions, and they're they're patient enough to not necessarily over peak and give away kills for free. This is also somebody who's going to have good communication and teamwork to understand where people are playing, to understand where people are coming from, to communicate where he needs people to help him, and good understanding and game sense of what's going on to know when he should or should not give up an area. And an example of this will arguably be the best player in the game, Palu, who, while not an overly aggressive player, is a player who can hold down an area for a long time, especially playing off of Nesk, and be very hard to clear, and usually can do so without dying, or at least not getting something in return for his position. And then we have a bridge. The bridge is the player who will protect the roam from being cut off from sight. So say on Villa, you are roaming on master side for a trophy defense. The bridge is the person who will maybe be protecting red stairs and people jumping in the boar window. This is the person who makes sure that the roamers do not get completely cut off so that they can't rotate back, and so that somebody maybe doesn't just walk in behind them, because obviously roamers are usually going to be more focused on a direct clear and not somebody pinching them. This is somebody who is pretty good at playing both sight and extending, so they have the ability to play sight and roam a bit. They know how to play smart positions so they do not get caught off, because they are kind of playing in attacker flank areas. And they have, once again, good communication with the roamers and the ability to coordinate plays and help them escape if need be. And this should usually be a more passive than aggressive player, because this player, you don't want to have a super aggressive bridge who maybe overpeaks something behind you, and then all of a sudden your two roamers are completely stuck on the opposite side of the map with no way to get back because your bridge player overpeaked something and died, and now maybe they're pinching out the roamers. And so it's very important to understand that while we go through these, a lot of these, and while there are more roles than players on a team, can fit into multiple roles. An entry player, a lot of times, is going to be a roamer or a lurker. A secondary entry player is a lot of times going to be a secondary roamer or a bridge. A secondary support player, a lot of times, is usually going to be a bridge or a flex player around sight, and so forth. The important thing is to understand that you at least need these kind of abilities covered on a team, or you're going to have open areas, and that you fit the roles that either you're playing or your team is playing. If you have a very aggressive player playing as your support player, that doesn't make sense. If you have a very passive player playing as your entry player, that doesn't make sense. If the support player for your team has a million entry engagements, either they're not a good support player or they need to be playing a more aggressive role. It's important to identify through the look at statistics, through the look at gameplay, what best fits people's roles and make the team around that. Because if you put a player on an uncomfortable role, you will have lackluster performance from that player and lackluster performance from that role. You should build your team around roles, not players. One thing I've always said is you can teach an aggressive player to be more passive, but you cannot teach a passive player to be more aggressive. You can't create an entry player, you find an entry player, but you can make an entry player play smarter, maybe play a second entry position. You can't turn a support player into an entry and just tell them to start running into a room, because there's a mindset that goes with it. And so I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about other roles that maybe you think I didn't mention, or the structure within a team, feel free to ask in the comments and let me know. And if you have any suggestions for the next video, let me know that as well. For the If Super Says It podcast, the next episode will be posted on the 16th. It will be at 11 a.m. PST if you would like to watch it live on twitch.tv/super. And we will be talking to Kino from XSET. If you're unable to catch it live, it will be uploaded to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, etc., etc. I hope you enjoy. I hope you have a good day. See you later.